Thornton, I'm only going to ask you this one time. Is the work that you turned in your own?
I can't lie to you, Dean Martin. Yes, it is.
Oh my, and if you remember that movie, Back to School, you remember the lovable Ned Beatty. That was just one of many roles that Ned Beatty actually had. I was sad to learn that he passed away at 83 because, well, growing up, my dad used to show me Back to School, and there he was as dean of the university that Thornton Mellon wanted to be part of. And of course, Rodney Dangerfield, in his own way, kidded around with him, called him Dean Martin, had a lot of fun with him, as you could just hear. And it's amazing the timing of this, because we will miss Ned Beatty. Obviously, he also was a network, amongst other things. But I've got right next to me a book by Rudy Ruettiger. Do you remember the movie Rudy? Do you remember who the father was of Rudy? Well, played by Sean Astin. But the real Danny Ruettiger, it was based off of Daniel Rudiger. And Rudy's father was a very tough, wanting results father. And so imagine this moment in real life and is brought to life by Ned Beatty. And let's relive it together. That's Sean Astin reading the letter that he got accepted to Notre Dame. And listen to this.
What's wrong?
Read it.
Congratulations. You are...
I did it.
You did it. You did it. Hey, guys. My son's going to Notre Dame.
How cool is that? That Rudy Ruettiger's father, after watching him try and reach that dream of being in Notre Dame, gets the acceptance letter at the power plant where his father and he worked at, to come home and say, look, I've made it. It is what life is about. It's bigger than what I'm going to talk about in a second. It's bigger than football. It's bigger than sports. I mean, we're watching sports now. We got the playoffs going on. The Islanders have their Inner Rudy. But the determination of this 5'6" kid that went to Joliet Catholic High School, that went into the Navy, that was Rudy, that had a movie made after him, to present his father with that, and Ned Beatty played that so well. And I thought, all right, God, you're telling me something. You're telling me something. I love the Irish. I've met Rudy himself. I've been reading the book. And by the way, that would not have happened. Getting this book and reading it, and then, meeting Daniel Rudy Ruettiger would not have happened without the kindness of the Connors. I've got to say, Mike and Beth and Mike Connors Jr., Connors and Sullivan, I mean, what a place, what a group of people to include me in their activities, like hanging out for a night with Rudy. Number 45, played by Sean Astin. Beloved movie. And there was Ned Beatty playing the father, the tough father, the emotional father, the excited father for his kid that finally got to run on the field as a Notre Dame Fighting Irish. And it all just reminds me of something that we haven't talked about yet, which is our inner Rudy. This is what Rudy Ruettiger himself talked about, the inner Rudy, the inner determination, inner fight, inner ambition to get it done, to have a dream and set to it. And if you are short, you kind of feel it even more when you're, a bulldog day in and day out in the big city. Or as he was in the Boston area, then he came back to, Indiana, and then he went to South Bend and made his way onto Notre Dame's football team and into the school. He found his inner Rudy, and he likes to share it. By the way, let me just touch on that for a minute, because he does talk about it in his book called Rudy, My Story. Quite a book already. I'm only on chapter 2, chapter 3. But think about it. The inner Rudy. Today, nearly 20 years after the film was made, this book was written a few years ago. Wherever I go, people talk to me about how they call on their inner Rudy to find the strength to follow their dreams. He actually idolized Rocky Balboa. He wanted his inner Rocky. And yet so many people from the movie alone were inspired to find their inner Rudy, to keep trying, to keep gutting it out, to keep going with this dream, the dream that you have. And then you read on a little more. I mean, this book is obviously still on, so you've got to find it. And he had people along the way saying, you got to do it. Go do it, Rudy. Go do it. It was his dream. And he went and did it. But not without working hard at it. Not without channeling himself, even when the darkest of times. Do you know Rudy Ruettiger? Do you know the man was actually at sea in the U.S. Navy on the European waters trying to navigate one of the USS, one of the many ships he was on, a destroyer he was on? And he got a sign from God on the USS ship that he was on the destroyer he was on, when the lieutenant that was looking after him, USS Robert L. Wilson, lieutenant had a Notre Dame ring. And this was nearly the seed was planting in his brain to become a Notre Dame football player. He was guided by a lieutenant who had graduated from Notre Dame. If that's not a God sign, I don't know what was for Rudy Ruettiger. And that inspired him to channel that energy, to get to Notre Dame, to be there, to do it, to work hard. And now, this kind of sets up what I'm talking to Kenny Albert about tomorrow. Kenny Albert, the famous broadcaster, son of Marv Albert. We talk about Marv's retirement, but we also talk about the Islanders' inner Rudy. Yes, they have a cap space that's way below the Tampa Bay Lightning. They have players that, as I mentioned before, don't have household names, yet they're going into game 2 up 1-0. They are channeling what I would say is their inner Rudy. So as we are leaving this pandemic, we've got 7 zip codes in New York City that haven't even been vaccinated yet. That does have to change. That at that point does have to change. There's got to be a better campaign to bring trust to those 7 zip codes. But as we're moving forward, how are you going to utilize the time that you've been given in the last year and a half to utilize your inner Rudy? Have you found your inner Rudy in this whole pandemic? And have you utilized it yet? Are you nervous to? Do you have to adapt to get there? Is it coming naturally to you? Is the work ethic coming naturally? That's what I got to know. The inner Rudy is in all of us. We've just got to channel it. And if the Islanders are inspiring 14,000 fans to sing the national anthem, then that's a great channeling right there. But I highly recommend the book. If you love the movie, I highly recommend the book, Rudy, My Story. by the Irish baseball teams playing in the College World Series. It's all connected right now. I don't know how the stars aligned for this, but it felt right to talk about it. And then a father's joy, seeing their kid get accepted to their dream school. Ned Beatty played his father so well. Sean Astin was perfect in that role as well. And so, it's time. It's time we truly think about our inner Rudy. Because, if anything, the last year and a half, we've had to have our inner Rudy to survive this damn pandemic. We have had to utilize our inner Rudy to not go insane while locked down. We had to gut this out one after the other in a level playing field. And I was not even be at a Nets playoff game. To be anywhere right now after a year we've had is like a wow moment. It's like, what gear did we have to turn on to be here right now in 2021? What gear was it? I think that gear could be found through the story of Daniel Rudy Ruettiger. Rudy. They lifted him up on the shoulders after that game. That should be all of us feeling incredible that we have been here today to talk to each other, to interact once again, to survive a pandemic, to be smart during a pandemic, to be responsible for it during it, enough to stay alive, to be more than surviving, thriving. And to be the Bulldogs against something that we've never seen before. I truly believe we subconsciously had to channel something to get through this pandemic, one way or the other. And I think we channeled it by being our inner Rudy. Our inner Rudy. It's a thing. It's a real thing. Whether we see it on the ice, whether we see how the waves of the community coming together, whether we see people like Zach Iskel, who you may not have known from Adam, but he is actually acknowledged by the Post as a viable candidate for comptroller. Those types, the hard workers, the roll up your sleeves, the entrepreneurs. The hard working men and women. And by the way, today is Flag Day, and I think every soldier on the battlefield has had to do this too. To defend our country in the middle of something like a war, in the middle of any conflict, takes an inner Rudy. It takes an inner determination, an inner spirit, an inner thinking of a 5'6" man trying to make it, being picked on, teased on, joked on, wherever he went, yet there he was on the shoulders of his players, his teammates at Notre Dame. There he was. New York City, and wherever you may be listening. New York City, there he was. And you know why? Because he never gave up. Mayor de Blasio said to me at the Memorial Day parade, at the Memorial Day event at the Intrepid, the city never gives up. And that's how we've survived. We never give up. The chips may be down, but we never give up. And we find it. We turn on another gear. 20 years ago, we had to turn on an entirely different gear to survive after 9/11. But even then, we found what so many found through Rudy's story. And congratulations on surviving this pandemic and being able to listen to this right now. To find that inner will to survive. Like the eye of the tiger, I know. But Rudy did it. And so can we. We've just got to channel it. That inner Rudy. That I think God aligned this tonight. Because Rudy, reading the book, realizing Ned Beatty's role, feeling fired up to tell the story, that's all God. That's just intuition through him. And I'm so glad I finally found a moment to talk about it. So go Irish. Go out and read Rudy, My Story. Go watch the movie Rudy to find out exactly Ned Beatty's impact on that movie. And then be inspired. And carry that inspiration with you through 2021 and beyond. We did not survive this pandemic for nothing. We survived it to truly embrace why we survived it. And to channel it every day. And I think that channeling is our inner Rudy. I'm Alexander Garrett, where we're always adapting. And you seem to be listening. So thank you so much for that as well. Always fired up to talk to you. And we'll talk to you again tomorrow when Kenny Albert joins the podcast. And one last thing. As we're talking about the inner Rudy, I want to tell you one thing that's frivolous. Extremely frivolous. Did you hear about the House Republicans filing a lawsuit over metal detectors? This is what our brain trust in Washington is dealing with. As people are struggling to find their inner Rudy, have found their inner Rudy, are inspired by Rudy, we've got this frivolous stuff by our politicians that are supposed to be leading us. 2 House Republicans announced a federal lawsuit against the House Sergeant at Arms and Chief Administration Officer over thousands of dollars in fines imposed due to violations of the Chamber's metal detector rules. This is the best part of the story at the Washington Examiner. So they get fined for violation of the Chamber's metal detector rules. The lawsuit brought up by Gomer and Andrew Clyde of Texas, Louis Gomer of Texas, and Andrew Clyde of Georgia, is challenging security measures put in place by Speaker Pelosi after the January 6th Capitol riots. Get what they're complaining about. The lawmakers argue that imposing and collecting fines reduces a member's salary during his or her term. They argue it also violates a constitutional provision saying lawmakers cannot be arrested while performing their congressional duties. That part I get. But can you imagine? They're so money hungry, they're fining for violations that they've probably committed, obviously. That's why I've stopped talking politics. Because it has become so frivolous and not as deep as I guess I thought it did years ago. There's a more deeper conversation we can have. A more inward conversation as we get out of this pandemic. And it continues by finding our inner Rudy. Have a great night.